Right, this is part two of the catch-up lecture in week 6. So the assignment, the first assignment, the group assignment is done. Nothing more you can do about it now. Um, what did we get out of it? Well, it should have been, and I'm certain it was, because I can see the recorded results, a practical case of working in a group. You've also learnt practical skills about creating, recording, and uploading a presentation. So you've been there, you've done that. You can say with confidence, hand on heart, yes, I can do that. But also in the process, it has given you the evidence to prove that you can work well in a group. So you can prove that if people say, well, we're looking for people with good group working skills, you can say, well, here's an example, and we happen to have recorded the results. So you can send the recording to potential employers, either with the whole lot of the full 12 minutes, or say, well, I'm speaking from minutes 3 to 6 or 9 to 12 or whatever. Okay. But also, if you're in a job interview, you can talk about, yes, I have worked in groups, and yes, it went very well all the way, swimmingly through, if that was your experience of working in a group. Or, on the other hand, if there were a few problems and wrinkles and so on, be honest, they're in the past, you've learned about them, talk about them briefly, and we'll talk about this next week in the week 7 lecture, because you've got to keep things very short. But you can talk about things that didn't go perfectly well and then what you've learned from it, because presumably you're not going to make the same mistake again. So that's good stuff to be able to offer in your cover letter and also in your CV, and something to talk about in the interview, which is very good. People want to hear these kind of experiences, so that's great. Okay, we'll just look about assignment 2 here. Now, we have already talked about the CV, the cover letter, and the employer awareness report. So in weeks 2 and 4, so that's what we'll be talking about now, and we'll also talk about the format of the taster interview. First of all, the CV. And there's some general guidance in week 2 about how to lay out your CV, including how to have a very clear timeline on it and clear overall structure. So there's lots of really excellent stuff there. It starts in week 1, but also in week 2 about how to lay out your CV. But often people have got the layout stuff, and then when I read what they say they've done in various jobs, I think, you haven't really got the idea of it. So here's an example of just 3 lines on your CV. But what a powerful 3 lines these can be, and what's implied in it. I want you to pick up all of this. First of all, we start with the bare facts, and so do give bare facts. That's what people like. You've got to be specific. So first of all, the timeline and the dates. Yes, this was only a temporary job. You did it one summer, but you had a job as how boring, a janitor. Yes, but we're going to make it interesting. So you were janitor at, let's say, a school near where you lived. Okay, well, put all the facts down, absolutely, so that they can be checked, and that you're not making it up. But then underneath, you've got a choice about what you can write about, and you could say, "Oh, my job was to unlock at 8:30, blah 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 in the morning, feed the cat, whatever." All this is not interesting. This is not relevant to whatever job it is you're applying. What you've got to do is list the 2 or 3 things that you got out of doing this job in your entire 3 months or 3 weeks or whatever it was that you were doing this job for, or a year, that have permanently changed you as a person, and mean that the person who walks into the interview, or the person who starts work for you on Monday morning, has these skills and experiences which are useful to an employer now. So you've got to look back, and maybe it was only for a brief period that you did one of these things, but you've still got to pull that out and say, yes, but as a result of that brief episode, I was changed, and I did get a bit of experience of something in some slight way, and that's useful. So here, what was the main job that you did? Where you had to undertake a deep clean of all the classrooms. Yes, okay, well, that's deeply dull and deeply boring, but on the other hand, it needs to be done. However, in the process of doing this properly, you noticed that there were actually some fire hazards. Well, this is important stuff. If you hadn't done that and there had been a fire weeks later or months later, school children might have been burned or staff might have been injured and so on. So as a result of your dull and boring but worthy activity, the school is a safer place. Well, that's a result. There's something to shout about, and this is the time to shout about it. So this is what you do. And to notice it, we use active verbs. Don't use passive verbs. If you don't know the difference, look it up. Be very specific about what you did, not just, oh, we decided to clean the school from top to bottom. That's too general. No, you've got to specify. We did all the classrooms, and it was a deep clean. It wasn't just a sort of normal routine clean. And the result, well, it was a safer school. That leads to something that we will call a vignette, and we'll talk about that in week 7, but that's something that you can talk about in your interview. Second example, you improved your handyman skills. So let's say that for a few days the normal boss, the head teacher or whatever, was away, but there were some other painters and decorators in, and while the head teacher was away on holiday, they said to you, well, look, can you just sort of supervise these painters? Not that you're not telling them how to paint, but if they've got any questions, they can come to you, and you know what needs to be painted and what doesn't, and so on. And what have you got out of that? Well, you were in effect the manager of those painters and decorators for, all right, it was only 2 or 3 days, but I mean, that's still something. So make the most of it. This is your chance to shout about the skills that you had in that job. You had man management and supervision skills. Good. Yes, you've been a line manager at quite a junior level, but that's fine. It's the start of it. And then again, there's got to be a result. In this case, it wasn't a safer school. It was a nice looking, cleaner smelling school, but you got something out of it, which was man management skills and so on. Okay, so that's what we want you to get out of each one of your entries. You should be able to turn it into a couple of little stories which illustrate something useful about you as a person now. Okay. Now, we talked about also the application process. Now I want to talk about the second thing, which is besides the CV, it's a cover letter. So let us imagine that you see in this example from week 2, and there's another one in week 4, which is a little bit closer to home. But this one shows the principles very well. You see a job advert. Let's suppose you're not a business person at all, but you are in fact an agricultural student, and you work on the livestock side. And yes, you see a job that does attract you. You want to become a goat herd. And here the farmer who's written it out says, well, this is what I'm looking for in a goat herd. And it's quite simple and basic. First of all, I want somebody who likes goats. I'm not going to employ someone as a goat herd who actually hates them, or is going to be cruel or sadistic or anything. I don't want any of that there. I want someone who actually likes goats. Okay. And then I'd also like somebody who's worked with goats and they're physically fit and so on. And because it's quite a remote location, they've got to be very resourceful, and not all the equipment works well, so you've got to be able to repair it. Well, that's what we call the job requirements. And then you've got to take your standard CV. So here's your name, Billy Gruff, and you grew up on a farm and you went to farming college, and now you're doing mountain sheep farming, but you think you'd like to move into something that's more to do with goats rather than sheep. Right, okay. And by the way, you also do fell running every day, and you like fixing cars. Okay, well, that's on your CV. And then your cover letter is the thing that links the two things. It links your CV to the job advert, and in particular the job requirements. So the cover letter starts off with your dear farmer kid, and you say what job you're applying for. Okay, that's absolutely important. That you must specify the job, particularly with large firms, because they will always have 3 or 4 jobs on the go, and you could get selected into the wrong heap right at the beginning, and then everything else that you've done is a total waste of time because you're applying for job A when in fact you've been put in the pile for job C. Well, that's not going to work. Okay, so we avoid those kind of errors right in the first sentence by saying what job you're applying for. And indeed, we suggest you use a heading, which includes the job title and the job number, if there is one. And then you start to get into it. Well, that's the job I'm looking for, and I have those skills. I've liked goats since my sister were given pet goats on the farm at Dad's when we were 7 years old, whatever. Right, okay. That's job requirement number 1. Job requirement number 2. I've worked with goats. Yes, not for very long, but I worked on my uncle's farm for 3 weeks because, he's also a farmer like my dad. Right. You want someone who's physically fit. Well, yes, I only run 10 miles a day, but it is up and down mountains and so on. So I think that's pretty fit. Okay. Am I resourceful? Yes. I once made a pig pen out of hay and baling time, whatever that means, blah, 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 and I repair old cars and so on. Yeah. So I meet the 4th requirement and the 5th requirement. Okay. And that's it. And you repeat your contact details at the bottom, and then that's your letter. And that's what a cover letter does. It joins the job requirement to your CV. And that's what you should really be looking for there. So that's the cover letter and the CV and our guide to them, and you should be looking through in detail the lectures in weeks 2 and 4, which go into these in more detail in terms of exactly how you should lay both of them out and what you're really trying to do, and they give you different examples as well. Just by way of contrast, you might want to compare the summary conclusions, which is that the CV, which is on the left, is to a certain extent driven by where you want to go. It's out of all of your history, you choose those bits which you want to emphasize now when you're looking for all the kinds of jobs that you're doing, the current 100 job applications that you're doing. So in those current job applications, your CV doesn't really change. However, on the right-hand side, the cover letters do change, so they are different in every case. Obviously, they're addressed to different people, but they're driven by the job requirements, and the job requirements keep on changing, so you have to keep on changing the cover letter. But you can do that quite quickly. So that's what we're looking for there, and there's more detail on that in the week 4 lecture.